Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place on Donetsk, Kupyansk and Liman front lines. And first we're going to start with Artyomovsk area. During the previous night we got some updates from this bridgehead. The Ukrainians, after they were defeated in the south of Andriivka, were forced to step back. After that the Russians made lots of artillery strikes against their positions, against the reserves in this area, but the Ukrainians, of course, they didn't want to step back. They don't want to lose these positions, the progress that they managed to gain during the clashes during the previous days. So somehow they managed to accumulate their forces. They brought new artillery systems on the combat line, and currently the Ukrainians one more time started everything from the beginning, and the first thing they start doing is attacking the Russian forces one more time in the vicinity of Andriivka. Because currently, as you can see, Andriivka is the focal point of the Ukrainian offensive operation on the south, and today the Ukrainians published another video how they were bombing and attacking the Russian positions among the forest line in the north of Andriivka. We're not going to watch this video because there are a lot of casualties among the Russian forces. Basically, the Russians have accumulated their infantry along this road. The Ukrainians managed to discover them, and as a result of artillery strike, a lot of Russian soldiers were wounded or probably even killed. Also, we got a lot of updates from the northern area. If you remember, yesterday in the video we discussed that the Russians during the previous day, during the previous 24 hours, launched significant offensive operation in direction of the Russian positions between Zaliznyanska and Dubovo-Vasilievka. That attack was repelled by the Russian forces, by the Russian infantry that were located on the edge positions, and after that or during that the Russians launched their own artillery strikes, artillery attacks against the Ukrainian positions in the vicinity of the settlements Golubovka, Privili, Makeevka. For example, in this video we see how the Russians discovered the Ukrainian positions. The Ukrainians reserved that the Ukrainians were using for their offensive operation that we just discussed. We see a convoy of Ukrainian forces who were heading, or probably was redeploying, or probably was getting some munition for the forces that were located on the combat line. Those forces were discovered and destroyed as a result of artillery strike. On this video we see how the Ukrainians were moving to the south, or probably also somewhere in this direction. The Russians discovered another Ukrainian armored vehicle, and as a result of a Lancet strike, that armored vehicle was destroyed. So basically the attack on the northern flank didn't give the Ukrainians any result. Furthermore, as a result of these clashes, as a result of that attack that the Ukrainians were trying to implement, the Ukrainian forces discovered their own positions, and the Russians, after they repelled that attack, destroyed every single discovered position in the vicinity of Makeevka, Golubovka and Privilya. Now we're moving to Liman front line. The Russians launched a small offensive operation in the west of Dibrova. The main purpose of that attack is to maintain the bridgehead, because if you remember, even yesterday we discussed some artillery strikes in this area. To be more precise, artillery strikes in the vicinity of this forest, which probably is under Ukrainian control. On this video we see how the Russians located another Ukrainian stronghold on the southwest of Dibrova, and as a result of thermobaric strike this area was burned and set on fire. We will not watch the entire video because of losses among people and manpower. Also, the Russians were preparing another wave of attack a little bit to the south of Dibrova. On this video we see how the Russians brought the demining equipment to the combat line. After that, demining equipment started the demining process and created the safe road for the Russian forces, which probably was used later by the Russian infantry and armored forces. And as a result of that attack, probably the Russians managed to develop their progress in the bridgehead in this area. We haven't received any results about those attacks, but anyway, I believe that's something the Russians managed to achieve. Now we are moving further to the Kupyansk front line, and we got a lot of updates from this area during the previous night. First, we're going to start with the area on the Karamzinovka bridgehead. The Russian sources are saying that we got a very detailed analysis of the situation in this area by the Russian forces, by the Russian sources, probably on the ground. First of all, the Russians currently are trying to attack and trying to develop their bridgehead in the vicinity of Sergeyevka in direction of Novoigorovka, and as a result of that attack, the Russians managed to force the Ukrainians to step back from this area in direction of Novosergeyevka, Novoigorovka, and from their side, the Ukrainians, when they lost their positions, tried to make some counter-offensive operation, trying to return their positions in this area, but all those attacks attacks were repelled and the Ukrainians with losses were forced to step back. The Russians reported that the total progress in this area was around 1.5 kilometers. Furthermore, the Russians continued their offensive operation in direction of salient of Novoyegorovsky salient, and some Russian sources reported that as a result of those clashes, the Russians managed to cut the salient and to establish control over this part, and at least the sources are saying like this. So basically, the progress of the previous day was of the results of the previous night was something like this. Yet Novoyegorovka wasn't captured by the Russians. Furthermore, the Russians activated their activity, they intensified their activity on the line between Andreevka, Mesazharovka, Stelmachovka, Kolomychiha, Zhirelny, and Novoselovska. The Russians are trying to attack in two directions. The first one from Novoselovka on the north of Stelmachovka. The second direction of attack is from Zhirelny in direction of Andreevka, and the same, almost the same area, Kolomychiha, Mesazharovka. So from two sides, the Russians are trying to attack this bridgehead, and probably the next week is going to be the battle of this bridgehead. And the Russian purpose, of course, is to return control or establish control over Zhiribets river completely. So basically these are like probably the last settlements on Zhiribets river that are still under Ukraine control. Other settlements of Zhiribets river are located on the south, but yet we haven't received any updates about any attempt from the Russian side to attack in this direction. Furthermore, other sources report that the Russians continue their offensive operation on the line between Sinkovka to Yahidne. And as a result of those clashes, the Russians managed to capture more checkpoints, more strongholds, and more trenches in this area. There is in this area, so the Russians continue advancing and continue pushing the Ukrainians, but yet we still haven't received any updates about any clashes in any of the settlement. So maybe that means that the Russians probably trying to maintain still the gray zone without active clashes inside the settlements. Now we're moving to Kharkiv and Sumy area, and during the previous night we got a very interesting update that one of the Russian authorities, a very reliable source in Russian parliament, reported that currently the Russian forces are trying to prepare their own offensive operation, and according to information we have, the Russians probably will start their offensive operation not somewhere in Kupyansk or Zaporozhye, Kherson area or something like this. According to information we have, the Russians will try to enter Sumy area, Sumy region, and the main purpose of this operation, of course, is to create a buffer zone, and this is like the minimal plan. Furthermore, some sources are saying that there were a lot of updates regarding the first probes of the Russian side to send some reconnaissance teams in the Sumy region, and those operations were pretty successful. The Russians managed to check and maintain the gray zone along the border in Sumy. So basically there are two goals. The first one is to create a buffer zone in Sumy. It's the minimal plan that the Russians need to achieve, and to force the Ukrainian artillery to send it further back from the combat line. And the main purpose, the main goal is to establish control over the Sumy that located very close to the border and very far from the main Ukrainian forces. Maybe this is going to be the maximum plan for the Russian forces, so we'll see. And that's it for this short video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.